The most consequential moments in history rarely arrive with warnings. They slip in quietly, almost politely. While the world focuses on wars, on elections, on daily noise, a colder shift is unfolding in the Arctic. In Greenland, far from capitals and cameras, a question has surfaced that goes far beyond territory. It is a question about trust. When Donald Trump presses Denmark over Greenland, he is not merely making a demand. He is testing the very idea of alliance. For Russia, this moment feels strangely familiar. For decades, Moscow sought to weaken NATO from the outside. Now the pressure is coming from within. But what looks like an opportunity may also be a warning. Because disruption does not always reward those who wait. If you want to understand how global power shifts before the consequences become unavoidable, stay with me. Because what begins in the Arctic will not stay there. To see why, we need to understand the real problem first. The issue here is not Greenland itself, and it is not one American president. The problem is structural. For nearly 70 years, the transatlantic alliance rested on a single assumption: that American power was stable, predictable, bound by long-term commitments. That assumption shaped Europe's security, Russia's calculations, and the global balance of power. Now it is under strain. Trump's second term has turned guarantees into negotiations, certainty into leverage. For Europe, this forces an uncomfortable reckoning. What happens when the protector becomes transactional? For Russia, this matters deeply, because Moscow does not need NATO to collapse overnight. It only needs hesitation to spread. Hesitation delays decisions. Hesitation weakens deterrence. Hesitation creates openings. And yet, the Kremlin faces a paradox. The same unpredictability that unsettles Europe also makes Washington harder to manage. No clear bargains. No reliable timelines. What we are witnessing is not a simple power struggle. It is a collision between an alliance built on trust and a world drifting toward transactions. To understand how we arrived here, we have to go back. After the Cold War, the West believed history had chosen a direction. Markets would integrate, borders would soften, security would become cooperative. Russia was expected to adapt, to integrate, to fade as a strategic challenger. That never happened. Instead, Moscow learned a different lesson. Power does not vanish, it relocates. As NATO expanded eastward, trust narrowed. Resentment hardened into strategy. By the time Vladimir Putin consolidated power, the goal was no longer inclusion. It was leverage. Not confrontation, but pressure. Wait for fractures, exploit doubt, undermine cohesion. For years, that strategy failed. The alliance held, until unpredictability entered the system. When commitments stop feeling permanent, history accelerates. And once that happens, small disputes stop being small. The first real shock arrived quietly. It did not come with troops, it came with disbelief. When Greenland entered the conversation, many dismissed it as theater, a provocation, a distraction. It was neither. For Europe, it was a moment of recognition. If this could be questioned, then everything could be questioned. Security guarantees, red lines, promises made in calmer decades. For Russia, the signal was clear. Not collapse, but hesitation. Alliances rarely break under attack. They erode when members stop trusting the rules. Yet Moscow did not celebrate, because confusion cuts both ways. A distracted alliance is weaker, but an unpredictable United States is far harder to manage. If you think this crisis was about land, you are missing the point. This was the moment uncertainty became policy. And once that happens, the system begins to expose its hidden mechanics. There is a quieter machine at work. It runs on perception, on expectations, on timing. Power today is not only about force, it is about predictability. For decades, NATO functioned because everyone knew the script. Who would respond? How fast? At what cost? Trump disrupted that script, not by tearing up treaties, but by injecting doubt into every calculation. For Russia, this logic is familiar. Hesitation has always been a force multiplier. But here is the catch. This strategy only works when uncertainty is controlled. Trump's foreign policy is not controlled uncertainty. It is volatility. That changes everything, because volatility does not just weaken allies, it scrambles adversaries' plans as well. Strategies built on patience begin to fray. Timelines collapse. That is why the Kremlin remains cautious, observant, silent. Because when systems misfire, no one knows who gets hurt first, and the pressure was about to surface again. The second surge came quickly, and from unexpected places. Not from Europe, not from the Arctic, but from regions where Russia once felt secure. In the Middle East, influence diluted. Decisions made without Moscow at the table. In the South Caucasus, mediation slipped away. Then came the signals. A partner detained, a tanker seized, pressure reapplied on old allies. Each move looked manageable alone. Together, they formed a pattern. This was not chaos. It was reassertion. Trump's unpredictability had a second edge. It did not deliver accommodation. No quick deal, no reset, no reward for patience. For the Kremlin, this was the realization. Waiting was no longer cost-free. The system was tightening, and the consequences would not remain abstract. Now let me bring this closer to you, because this is not an elite game. It does not stay in conference rooms. When alliances wobble, the cost moves downward. You feel it in prices, in uncertainty, in the sense that the world feels harder to predict. Strategic doubt does not explode. It leaks. It turns planning into anxiety, stability into a question mark. This is why this moment matters. When great powers improvise, ordinary people absorb the shock. If you have wondered why the future feels less secure, less anchored, this is where it begins. Stay with me, because the consequences do not stop at borders. They ripple outward. Once uncertainty spreads, it reshapes the global map. In Asia, partners watch closely, not for promises, for patterns. They ask one question: is commitment automatic or conditional? In the global South, power looks less principled, more transactional. That opens space for hedging, for non-alignment. For China, this moment is instructive, not because Russia is rising, but because the West looks divided. Markets respond, supply chains adjust, security planning becomes provisional. This is how geopolitical shocks multiply. Not through conquest, but recalculation. The world does not switch sides overnight. It drifts, and drift in geopolitics is how order erodes. To understand where this leads, we have to look ahead. From here, the future splits, not into one outcome, but three. The first is stabilization. Allies adapt. Uncertainty becomes managed. Rules return, altered but intact. Order survives. The second is drift. No collapse, no repair. Commitments exist, but confidence thins. Decisions slow. Power becomes transactional. Then there is the third path, fragmentation. Trust erodes faster than institutions can respond. Security becomes conditional. In that world, crises multiply because restraint no longer feels reliable. History accelerates. Which future emerges depends on one variable: credibility. And credibility, once damaged, is the hardest thing to restore. All that remains is the final insight. Every global order ends the same way, but with disbelief. People realize too late that stability was never automatic. It was maintained. Greenland was not the cause, it was the mirror. For Russia, patience remains the strategy. For Europe, adaptation is no longer optional. For the United States, credibility is now the currency. And for you, This moment offers a choice: ignore the pattern or recognize it. If this analysis changed how you see the world, stay with me. Share this, because in the next video, we will explore what happens when uncertainty becomes the system itself. And once that line is crossed, there is no return to the old order.